Commander Vex Thor stood in the observation deck overlooking the warbeast pens, and if you could read the body language of a 7-foot-tall reptilian with forearms and scales the color of an angry thunderstorm, you would know he was approximately 3 seconds away from breaking something expensive. "Explain this to me again," he hissed through a jaw that could bite through reinforced steel. "Slowly, because I want to make absolutely certain I understand the magnitude of this disaster before I start firing people out of airlocks." Chief Handler Embrix, who had worked with the Krill warbeast for 15 years and had never seen his commander this shade of purple, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, as of 0600 hours this morning, all 70 combat units have refused to exit their containment areas. They will not respond to standard commands. They ignore feeding protocols, and they have been making, well, sounds." "Sounds," Vex repeated flatly. "Yes, sir. Distressed vocalizations. The science team describes them as, quote, pathetic whining noises, end quote." Vex turned his 4 eyes toward the observation window. Below, in reinforced pens designed to contain some of the deadliest predators the galaxy had ever seen, sat 70 Krill warbeasts. Each one was roughly the size of an Earth grizzly bear, covered in midnight black scales with bioluminescent markings that usually glowed red during combat aggression. Right now, those markings were a dull, sad blue. The creatures lay on the ground like giant, miserable puppies, occasionally letting out long, mournful sounds that echoed through the facility. It would have been adorable if it wasn't completely catastrophic. "Let me make sure I have this right," Vex said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that made experienced soldiers check their life insurance policies. "We have invested 17 years and approximately 900 billion credits into this program. We have genetically engineered the perfect combat species, combining the pack-hunting intelligence of Theta Centauri predators with the regenerative abilities of Kepler swamp beasts and the combat aggression of Andromedon shrikehawks. These creatures have been trained since birth to be unstoppable. They have completed 73 successful combat operations. They have a perfect mission record, and now, 3 days before the biggest military operation in Coalition history, they have decided to just, give up?" "He is an accurate summary, sir," Mick said, wondering if his own life insurance was paid up. Vex pressed 2 of his hands against the observation window hard enough to make it flex. "What changed? What is different? Did someone alter their genetic programming? Is there a virus? Has someone been tampering with their neural implants?" "We have run every diagnostic test in our database," Mix replied, pulling up a datapad with shaking hands. "Genetics are stable. No viral or bacterial infections. Neural implants are functioning normally. Nutritional levels are optimal. Environmental controls are within standard parameters. By every measurable standard, the Krill should be at peak combat readiness." "But they are not." "No, sir, they are very much not." Vex was quiet for a long moment, watching the sad, whimpering creatures below. The Krill warbeast program was his career masterpiece. He had overseen it from conception, had personally selected each genetic trait, had designed the training protocols that turned these beasts into the Coalition's most effective ground combat unit. They were supposed to be emotionless, efficient, perfect. They were not supposed to look like someone had just told them their favorite toy was broken. "I want a full investigation," Vex said finally. "Pull security footage from the last month. Interview every handler, every technician, every scientist who has had contact with the beasts. Check supply deliveries for contamination. I want to know if someone so much as sneezed in the wrong direction near these pens. We have 72 hours to fix this, or I will personally explain to the Coalition High Command why their trillion-credit investment is currently crying in a corner." "Yes, sir," Mick said, already backing toward the door. "I will assemble the investigation team immediately." "And Mix?" "Sir." Vex turned all 4 eyes on the handler, and his expression could have frozen stars. "If I find out this is sabotage, if I discover that someone deliberately interfered with my beasts, I will not bother with a court-martial. I will simply introduce them to the Krill personally and let nature take its course. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." As Mark scurried away, Vex returned his attention to the observation window. Down below, one of the Krill lifted its massive head and let out another long, pathetic whine that somehow managed to sound like pure heartbreak. "What happened to you?" Vex muttered to himself. If he had known the answer, he would have immediately checked himself into the nearest medical facility for a psychological evaluation, because the truth was so absurd, so completely ridiculous, that no rational military commander would have believed it possible. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had been defeated by something far more terrifying than any weapon. They had been defeated by human kindness. The human medical team arrived at Docking Bay 7 exactly on schedule, which should have been Commander Vex's first clue that something was wrong. In his experience, humans were never on time. They were either fashionably late or annoyingly early, but never precisely punctual. Corporal Jake Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle with the kind of relaxed confidence that suggested he had never met a regulation he couldn't bend. He was average height for a human, with dark hair that was just slightly longer than military standard and a smile that seemed to be his default expression. His medical uniform was clean and properly worn, but somehow he still managed to look like he had just rolled out of bed. Lieutenant Emma Kowalski followed behind him, carrying their equipment cases with the efficient precision of someone who had learned long ago that if she didn't organize things, Jake certainly wouldn't. She was taller, blonde, and possessed the kind of sharp, analytical gaze that suggested she was constantly diagnosing everyone around her and finding them wanting. "Nice station," Jake said cheerfully, looking around the docking bay. "Very clean, very organized, very, militaristic." "It is a military station," Emma pointed out. "Right, but some military stations have personality. This one looks like someone designed it using only right angles and the color gray." "I think it is elegant," Emma replied, though her tone suggested she agreed with him but would never admit it. They were halfway across the docking bay when a security team of 6 heavily armed guards materialized around them. The guard captain, a hulking insectoid whose species Jake could never pronounce correctly, gestured toward their equipment cases. "You will come with us," the captain buzzed. "Commander Vex requires your immediate presence." Jake and Emma exchanged glances. "Is this about the physicals?" Jake asked. "Because we are scheduled to start processing Coalition personnel tomorrow. We are a whole day early. I brought donuts and everything." The guards did not respond to this. They simply formed a tight escort formation and began marching the humans toward the interior of the station. "Are we under arrest?" Emma asked, her tone shifting from casual to concerned. "You are not under arrest," the captain said. "Yet." "Oh, good," Jake said. "The yet makes me feel so much better." They were led through a series of corridors that became progressively more secure, passing through 3 separate checkpoints before arriving at a large conference room. Commander Vex stood at the head of a massive table, all 4 arms crossed, his expression suggesting that he was mentally calculating the most efficient way to make their deaths look accidental. "Sit," Vex commanded. The humans sat. Vex began pacing, which was impressive, given that he had to coordinate 4 arms while doing it. "3 weeks ago you arrived on this station as part of the Coalition Medical Exchange Program. Your assignment was to provide medical training and support to our personnel. Simple, straightforward, difficult to mess up." "I feel like there is a but coming," Jake said. "However," Vex continued, ignoring him, "since your arrival, my Warbeast program has experienced catastrophic behavioral failure. 70 combat units, representing 15 years of work and nearly 1 trillion credits, are now completely non-functional. They refuse to fight. They refuse to train. They barely eat. They spend their time making noises that my chief zoologist describes as emotionally devastating." Emma's eyebrows rose. "And you think we did this?" "I do not believe in coincidences, Lieutenant. Before you arrived, my beasts were perfect. Now they are broken, therefore you broke them." "That is terrible logic," Emma said. "Commander," Jake interjected, raising one hand like he was back in school, "I promise you we have been nowhere near any war beasts. Our entire 3 weeks here has been spent in the medical bay reviewing Coalition medical protocols, which, by the way, are very thorough. Impressively boring, but thorough." Vex stopped pacing and leaned forward, all 4 hands pressed against the table. "Security footage shows that 21 days ago, you, Corporal Martinez, had direct contact with a krill warbeast that escaped during a training exercise." Jake's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, and then a sheepish understanding. Oh, you mean the big scaly guy who was bleeding everywhere?" "The combat unit that breached containment during aggression training," Vex corrected coldly. "Right, yeah, that one." Jake nodded. "In my defense, he looked really hurt, and I am a medic, so helping injured creatures is kind of my whole thing." Emma turned to stare at him. "You did not mention this." "It did not seem important. I was walking back from the commissary, there was this bleeding animal limping down the corridor, so I helped it. Standard battlefield triage." "You administered medical care to a classified military asset without authorization," Vex said, his voice dropping even lower. "I gave first aid to an injured animal," Jake countered. "Where I come from, we call that being a decent person." A door at the far end of the conference room opened, and a small, nervous-looking creature scurried in. This was Rix, the lead xenobiologist for the krill program, and he looked like he had not slept in several days. His species resembled an otter that had evolved to walk upright and develop anxiety disorders. "Commander, I have reviewed the security footage you requested," Rix said, his voice trembling slightly. "I believe I know what happened." "Explain," Vex ordered. Rix activated a holographic display, showing footage of Jake kneeling beside an injured krill in a corridor. On the video, Jake was talking to the creature in a calm, soothing voice while cleaning its wounds. "There you go, buddy," video Jake was saying. "Just a few cuts, nothing serious. You are going to be fine." "Yeah, I know it stings. Almost done. There we go. Good boy." Emma's hand went to her face. "You called a military war beast a good boy?" He was being very brave about the antiseptic. On the screen, the krill's bioluminescent markings shifted from red to soft blue, and it made a small, almost purring sound. Rix paused the footage. "Commander, the krill are pack predators. Their social structure is built on strict hierarchies, established through dominance displays and, in rare cases, through protective bonding behaviors. In the wild, young krill imprint on the first adult that shows them care during a moment of vulnerability." Vex's scales went very still. "No. We raised all of our krill in sterile, isolated environments specifically to prevent emotional bonding," Rix continued miserably. "We wanted them aggressive and detached. However, this particular unit had never experienced genuine care or comfort. When Corporal Martinez treated its injuries and spoke to it in a calming manner during a moment of pain and fear, he accidentally triggered a deep evolutionary response." "No," Vex repeated. "The krill imprinted on him, sir. And because they are pack animals with a shared neural communication network that we encouraged for tactical coordination, when one imprinted, they all imprinted." There was a very long silence. "Let me make sure I understand," Emma said slowly, trying not to smile. "Your unstoppable killing machines bonded with Jake like baby ducks?" "That is a crude but essentially accurate assessment," Rix confirmed. Jake raised his hand again. "So, just to clarify, the war beasts are sad because they think I am their dad?" "Pack Alpha," Rix corrected. "But yes, functionally they have adopted you as their parental figure, and are experiencing separation anxiety." Vex made a sound that no human language had words for, but that universally translated to someone having a very, very bad day. Commander Vex sat down heavily in his chair, which creaked under his weight in a way that suggested it was sympathizing with his current emotional state. He pressed all 4 hands against his face, which was the galactic equivalent of someone counting to 10 before they committed murder. "Let me make absolutely certain I understand the situation," Vex said, his voice muffled by his hands. "My war beasts, genetically engineered to be the perfect combat units, creatures that have taken down enemy fortifications and torn through armor plating like tissue paper, have been reduced to emotional wrecks because a human gave one of them a band-aid and called it a good boy. Technically, I used regenerative gel and a compression bandage," Jake offered helpfully. "And I also gave him a painkiller. That is not helping your case, Corporal. I am just saying, it was quality medical care." Emma had given up trying not to laugh and was now actively biting her lip to keep from making the situation worse. Rix was pulling up additional data on his holographic display, his small hands shaking as he navigated through charts and genetic markers. "Commander, if I may," Rix said nervously. "This is actually a fascinating development from a xenobiological perspective. The krill's capacity for bonding was theoretically possible based on their genetic profile, but we had assumed the conditioning protocols would override any instinctual attachment behaviors. The fact that a single act of compassion could bypass years of psychological training suggests their social bonding mechanisms are far more powerful than we anticipated." "I do not care about fascinating developments," Vex growled. "I care about having functional combat units in 72 hours. With respect, sir, I do not think that is possible anymore." Vex's head snapped up. "Explain." Rix pulled up a biological readout showing the krill's neural patterns. "This is the standard brain activity we observe in our war beasts during normal operations. Notice the activity in the aggression centers and the minimal engagement in the social bonding regions." He switched to a new scan. "This is the current neural activity across all 70 units. The aggression centers are dormant. The bonding centers are hyperactive. They are essentially experiencing the neurological equivalent of heartbreak." "Can we reverse it?" Vex demanded. "Reprogram them? Reset their conditioning?" "We could try," Rix said slowly, "but there are significant risks. The krill's neural networks are now synchronized around this attachment. Attempting to break the bond artificially could cause severe psychological trauma. We could end up with 70 beasts that are not just non-functional, but actively self-destructive. Jake leaned forward. Wait, are you saying they could hurt themselves? In extreme cases of separation from a bonded pack leader, krill have been known to refuse food until they die, Rix confirmed. In the wild, it is extremely rare, because pack structures are very stable, but in captivity, with an absent alpha, the stress could be fatal. This is the most depressing thing I have ever heard, Jake said quietly. Emma's expression had shifted from amused to concerned. How long do we have before the separation anxiety becomes dangerous? Based on current stress hormone levels, I would estimate 2 weeks before we start seeing serious health deterioration. Beck stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is unacceptable. We cannot lose these assets. The Coalition has already committed them to Operation Shattered Sky. High Command is expecting 70 krill units to support the ground assault on the Vexnari Fortress world. Then I suggest you find a way to include Corporal Martinez in the operation, Rick said, then immediately looked terrified that he had spoken out loud. Absolutely not, Vex snapped. Humans are support personnel. They do not deploy to active combat zones with specialized military assets. Commander, Emma interjected, her tone taking on the crisp professionalism of an experienced military officer. With all due respect, you are facing a choice between deploying with a human medic or deploying with 70 depressed war beasts who will not fight. One of those options has a significantly higher chance of mission success. I refuse to believe this is happening, Vex muttered. I refuse to believe that my entire career is being held hostage by animal feelings. Sir, Rick said carefully, perhaps we should conduct a demonstration? Verify that the Creole do indeed respond positively to Corporal Martinez's presence? If the effect is as strong as I believe, we may need to consider restructuring the entire program. Vex looked like he wanted to argue, but the analytical part of his military mind was already running calculations. He was cornered, and he knew it. Fine, he said finally. We will conduct a controlled test, but I want full security protocols in place. If anything goes wrong, if those beasts show even a hint of aggression toward the human, we terminate the experiment immediately. Agreed, Rick said, already moving toward the door. Jake stood up, brushing off his uniform. So I am going to meet the sad murder puppies. Great. This is definitely how I pictured my Thursday going. They are not puppies, Vex said coldly. They are weapons. We weapons that miss me, apparently, Jake replied with a grin that suggested he was either very brave or very stupid. As they walked toward the War Beast containment facility, Emma fell into step beside Jake. You realize this is completely insane, right? She said quietly. Oh, absolutely, Jake agreed. But also kind of amazing? I mean, how many people can say they accidentally adopted 70 alien death lizards? Jake, they are called war beasts for a reason. They are dangerous. Everything is dangerous, Emma, doesn't mean they do not deserve kindness. She looked at him for a long moment. You know, that attitude is either going to get you killed or make you a legend. Can I pick both? That is not how that works. They arrived at the containment facility entrance, where Chief Handler Emmerichs was waiting with a security team. The handler looked at Jake with an expression somewhere between awe and terror. Corporal Martinez, Mick said formally. Before we proceed, I need to brief you on krill behavior. They are pack predators with significant strength and speed. Even in a non-aggressive state, they could accidentally injure you. Please follow all safety protocols. Got it, Jake said. Respect the apex predators. Do not make sudden moves. Try not to die. I am being serious. So am I. Vex positioned himself at the observation window with Emma and Rix. Below, in the main containment area, all 70 krill lay in various states of miserable repose. Their bioluminescent markings were dim blue, and the occasional whimper echoed through the space. All right, Vex said into the comm system. Martinez, you are cleared to enter. Mix, open the main gate. The reinforced door slid open with a heavy pneumatic hiss. Jake took a deep breath and stepped into the war beast pen. And that was when things got really interesting. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. Jake stood just inside the entrance to the containment area, looking out at 70 massive scale-covered predators that could theoretically rip him apart before anyone could blink. The krill continued their melancholy lounging, barely acknowledging the opening door. Then one of them, a particularly large specimen with a distinctive scar across its snout, lifted its head. Its bioluminescent markings flickered from dull blue to bright, excited cyan. It made a sound that could only be described as a squeal of pure joy. "Oh no," Rix whispered from the observation deck. The scarred creel launched itself toward Jake with a speed that made the security team reach for their weapons, but instead of attacking, the creature slid to a stop right in front of the medic and immediately rolled onto its back, exposing its armored belly and making excited chirping noises. Is he asking for belly rubs?" Emma asked, her voice caught between disbelief and laughter. "That is a submissive greeting display," Rick said, his voice filled with scientific wonder. "That is the way a subordinate pack member greets their alpha. I have never seen a krill do that voluntarily." Jake, to his credit, did not panic. He knelt down and carefully scratched the krill's belly plating. "Hey there, buddy. I remember you. How is that leg healing up?" The krill made a sound like a 200-pound cat purring. Then the other 69 krill noticed what was happening. "Oh no," Rix repeated, with significantly more emphasis. The entire pack surged toward Jake in a wave of scales and bioluminescent excitement. The security team actually raised their weapons, but Vex held up one hand. "Wait," the commander said, watching intently. The krill surrounded Jake in a massive circle, but there was no aggression in their movements. They were bouncing on their feet, their markings flashing brilliant shades of blue and green, making sounds that ranged from happy chirps to excited warbles. Several of them were doing what could only be described as a wiggling dance. "Bees are doing zoomies," Emma said flatly. 70 war beasts are doing zoomies." Jake laughed and held up his hands. Okay, I missed you guys too. But we need to calm down a little bit. You are all very big and very enthusiastic." Remarkably, the krill actually calmed down. They stopped bouncing and sat in a rough semicircle around Jake, their heads tilted attentively, their markings settling into a steady, peaceful blue-green glow. "Did they just follow a verbal command?" Meeks asked over the comm, his voice filled with shock. "We have been trying to implement verbal control protocols for years. They never worked." Jake walked slowly through the group, and the krill parted to let him through, then immediately followed behind him like a scaled honor guard. The scarred one stayed right at his side, refusing to be more than 3 feet away. "This is Unit 17, Mick said, pulling up the krill's file. "It was the one Corporal Martinez treated. It has always been one of our most aggressive specimens. Perfect combat scores. Highest kill count in live exercises." "What's your name, buddy?" Jake asked the krill, scratching behind what might have been its ears. Unit 17 made a soft trilling sound. "That is not a name," Jake said. "You need a proper name." He looked up at the observation window. "Emma, help me out here." "Absolutely not," Emma called back. "Come on, he is sweet, look at him." Emma sighed dramatically. "Fine, he is kind of a butterscotch color when his markings light up like that. Call him Butterscotch." There was a strangled sound from Commander Vex that might have been his soul leaving his body. "Butterscotch," Jake repeated, and Unit 17, now Butterscotch, made an approving chirp and nuzzled against Jake's hand. "Butterscotch it is." "I am in hell," Vex muttered. "This is hell. I died and went to military hell." Jake spent the next 20 minutes interacting with the krill, and it became increasingly clear that Rix's assessment was entirely correct. The warbeasts responded to Jake with immediate obedience, obvious affection, and a level of engagement they had never shown with their trained handlers. When Jake asked them to line up, they lined up. When he told them to demonstrate their hunting formation, they snapped into a perfect tactical spread. When he asked them to show him their combat abilities, they performed a coordinated attack sequence on training dummies that was, according to Mix's stunned commentary, 30% more efficient than their previous best performance. And through it all, they kept glancing back at Jake, checking for approval, their markings glowing brighter whenever he praised them. "This is unprecedented," Rick said, frantically taking notes on his datapad. "The krill are demonstrating higher cognitive function, better tactical coordination, and improved morale, all because of positive reinforcement and social bonding. We trained them for years using dominance and punishment protocols," Mix added quietly. "We never considered that they might respond better to basic kindness," Emma suggested. "It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud." Vex had been silent for several minutes, watching the display with all 4 arms crossed. Finally, he activated the comm. "Martinez, return to the observation deck. We need to discuss this situation." Jake gave Butterscotch one final pat, promised the assembled krill that he would visit again soon, and headed for the exit. The sound of 70 disappointed warbeasts whimpering in unison was somehow both heartbreaking and absurd. When Jake rejoined the group, Vex was pacing again, but this time his movements seemed less angry and more calculating. "This is a disaster," Vex said, but his tone had shifted. "But it is also an opportunity." "I am sorry, did you just say opportunity?" Emma asked. "The Krill are performing better than they ever have," Vex continued. "Their coordination is improved, their response time is faster, and most importantly, they are motivated. I have never seen them this engaged." He stopped pacing and looked directly at Jake. "Corporal Martinez, how would you like a promotion?" "Depends entirely on what I am being promoted to," Jake said cautiously. "Chief Behavioral Consultant for the Krill War Beast program," Vex said. "You would remain with the beasts, oversee their training, and deploy with them on combat operations." "Absolutely not," Emma interjected. "Jake is a medic, not a war beast handler, and certainly not combat deployment personnel." "The beasts will not function without him," Vex countered, "and based on what we just witnessed, they will function better with him than they ever have before. Lieutenant, you are a military officer, you understand operational necessity." Em's jaw tightened, but she did not argue further. Jake looked through the observation window at the Krill, who were still watching the door he had exited through, waiting for him to return. Butterscotch had his face pressed against the reinforced glass, leaving noseprints on the transparent surface. "If I agree to this," Jake said slowly, "I have conditions." Vex's expression suggested he was already regretting this conversation, but he gestured for Jake to continue. "First, we stop calling them units. They are individuals. They get names. Second, we change the training protocols. No more dominance and punishment. We use positive reinforcement. Third, we reevaluate their purpose. Maybe there is a better use for them than just combat. These are military assets worth 900 billion credits," Vex said flatly. "These are living, thinking beings who deserve to be treated with respect," Jake countered. "You can have the best-trained, most loyal war beasts in the galaxy, or you can keep treating them like disposable weapons. Your choice, Commander." The two locked eyes, and for a moment it seemed like Vex might simply end the conversation and have Jake escorted off the station. Then Butterscotch let out a particularly pathetic whine from the containment area, and something in Vex's expression cracked. "Fine," Vex said through gritted teeth. "We will do this your way. But understand this, Corporal. If this fails, if the Krill do not perform in combat, if your methods prove ineffective, we will revert to the original protocols. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Jake said, extending his hand. Vex looked at the offered hand like it might bite him, then reluctantly shook it with one of his forehands. "Congratulations," Emma said dryly to Jake. "You just became the galaxy's most unlikely military consultant." "I prefer to think of myself as a professional space dad," Jake replied with a grin. Rix was already pulling up requisition forms and training schedules, his anxiety temporarily replaced with scientific enthusiasm. "I will need to restructure the entire behavioral program. We will need new facilities, revised feeding protocols, individualized care plans for each Krill. We will also need to brief High Command," Vex added. "They are not going to like this." "Then I suggest we make it sound like a tactical advantage rather than an emotional support program," Emma said. "Focus on the improved performance metrics." As the group began planning the restructured program, Jake looked back through the observation window one more time. Butterscotch was still waiting by the door, and when he saw Jake looking, his markings flashed bright, happy cyan. Jake waved at him. Butterscotch did what could only be described as a happy dance. And Commander Vex had to sit down again, because his reality had officially become too strange to process, standing up. The emergency holographic conference with Coalition High Command happened exactly 4 hours later, which gave Vex just enough time to develop a stress-induced headache that spanned all 4 of his temporal lobes. The holographic projections of 7 Coalition command officers materialized around the conference table, representing the major species of the galactic government. Admiral Thorne, a crystalline being who communicated through light refraction, spoke first. "Commander Vex, your report indicates a significant alteration to the Krill program. Please explain why we are considering restructuring a 15-year initiative 72 hours before deployment." Vex stood at attention, flanked by Jake, Emma, and Reeks. "Admiral, the Krill have demonstrated improved combat performance and tactical coordination following the implementation of new behavioral protocols. However, these improvements require ongoing human oversight." "Define improved," said General Crix, an insectoid whose species valued efficiency above all else. Rick stepped forward nervously. "Response time is down by 30%. Tactical coordination has improved by 42%. Mission readiness scores are the highest we have ever recorded." "And the cost?" Admiral Thorne asked. We need to assign Corporal Martinez as permanent chief behavioral consultant and restructure our training approach, Vex said, then added reluctantly, and possibly reconsider the Krill's primary operational function. That caused a ripple of confusion through the holograms. Jake cleared his throat. Sirs, with respect, I have an observation. The Krill are incredible trackers. They have advanced problem-solving skills, and they are fiercely loyal to their pack. Those traits make them exceptional for combat, sure, but they would make them even better for search and rescue operations. You want to turn war beasts into rescue animals, General Kree said, his tone suggesting Jake had just proposed turning battleships into taxis. I want to use them where they will be most effective and most happy, Jake replied. Happy soldiers fight better. Happy rescue workers save more lives, and based on what I have seen, the Krill are capable of both, but they will excel at whatever mission makes them feel valued. Emma added, from a medical perspective, the psychological health of combat units directly correlates to operational effectiveness. The data supports Corporal Martinez's assessment. There was a long silence as the command officers consulted with each other through private channels. Finally, Admiral Thorne spoke again. The Coalition has invested significant resources in the Krill program. However, our mission is to protect Coalition citizens and territory. If these creatures can be more effectively utilized in search and rescue operations while maintaining combat capability as a secondary function, that serves our goals. The Admiral's light pattern shifted toward Vex. Commander, you will implement a hybrid program. Train the Krill for primary search and rescue operations, with combat deployment as needed. Corporal Martinez will oversee behavioral development. You have 6 months to demonstrate results. Vex's scales rippled with surprise. Sir, Operation Shattered Sky is being reassigned to the 7th Fleet's ground forces, Admiral Thorne interrupted. Your Krill will be deployed to the relief efforts on Deneb Station, where mining collapse has trapped 3,000 workers underground. If they perform as described, it will be far better publicity than another military operation. General Crix added, and if this human bonding phenomenon proves replicable, we want full xenopsychological studies. This could revolutionize how we work with trained species across the Coalition. The holograms began flickering out one by one until only Admiral Thorne remained. "A more thing, Commander," the Admiral said. "The optics of turning weapons into heroes will play well with the civilian population. The Coalition could use some positive news. Do not waste this opportunity." The hologram vanished. Vex stood very still for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then he turned to Jake. "You just convinced Coalition High Command to repurpose a trillion-credit military program based on the power of positive thinking. And belly rubs," Jake added. "Do not forget the belly rubs." "I need a drink," Vex muttered. "I need about 6 drinks," Rix agreed. Emma was already pulling up the details on Deneb Station. Mining collapse, limited access tunnels, toxic gas pockets, and structural instability. This is actually perfect for the Krill. They can navigate tight spaces, they have enhanced olfactory senses for locating survivors, and their armored hides will protect them from environmental hazards. Plus, they will look adorable on the news footage, Jake said with a grin. Giant rescue lizards saving miners? That is peak good publicity. "They are not adorable," Vex insisted weakly. "They are apex predators." "We are apex predators who do little dances when I show up," Jake countered. "That is adorable, by definition." Rix was already frantically typing on his datapad. "We will need to redesign the harness systems for rescue operations, implement new training scenarios, establish communication protocols with disaster relief teams. We will also need to negotiate hazard pay for Martinez," Emma said. "And he is going to need unlimited coffee, trust me on this." "Unlimited coffee," Vex repeated. "Non-negotiable," Jake confirmed. "I cannot be responsible for 70 emotional support murder lizards without caffeine. That is just unreasonable." Vex looked at each of them in turn. The nervous scientist who was already redesigning an entire program, the pragmatic surgeon who had somehow become an advocate for warbeast welfare, and the overly cheerful medic who had accidentally adopted the galaxy's most dangerous predators through the sheer power of basic human decency. "Fine," Vex said finally. "Unlimited coffee, hazard pay, full operational authority over Krill behavioral protocols. But Martinez, if this fails, if those beasts cause even one preventable casualty, this program ends immediately." "Understood, sir," Jake said, offering his hand again. This time, Vex shook it without hesitation. "Now, if you will excuse me," Vex said. "I need to personally explain to my staff why we are naming military assets and teaching them to be rescue workers. This conversation is going to require so much paperwork. As Vex left, Emma turned to Jake. You realize you just took responsibility for 70 giant reptilian children, right? Best Thursday ever, Jake replied, still grinning. From the containment area below, they could hear the Krulls starting to make excited noises again, as if they somehow sensed that Jake was staying. Butterscotch pressed his face against the observation window and made a happy trill. Jake waved at him. And somewhere in the universe, probably on multiple worlds simultaneously, military strategists were having to completely rethink everything they thought they knew about combat psychology, all because one human medic had decided to be kind to an injured animal. Humanity's reputation for being weird just got significantly weirder. 6 months later, the Krill Search and Rescue Program was the most decorated unit in the Coalition. The Deneb station operation had been a stunning success. All 3,000 miners were recovered alive, and footage of Butterscotch gently carrying an unconscious worker through collapsed tunnels had gone viral across 47 star systems. The image of Jake coordinating 70 massive predators with nothing but hand signals and encouraging words had become the poster for interspecies cooperation. Commander Vex, who had somehow survived the transition without losing his mind entirely, stood in the newly renovated Krill training facility, watching Jake run the morning session. The beasts moved through an obstacle course designed to simulate disaster scenarios, working in coordinated teams to locate dummy victims and clear debris. Red team, check the northwest sector, Jake called out, and 5 Kryl immediately peeled off to investigate. Blue team, I need careful excavation on that collapsed wall. Gentle, we do not want secondary collapses. The Krill worked with precision that would have made their original military handlers weep with envy. Emma approached Vex with 2 cups of coffee, offering him one. You have to admit, this worked out better than expected. I am not admitting anything, Vex said, but he accepted the coffee. Though I will concede that the program has exceeded operational projections. You mean you were wrong and Jake was right? I will never say those words out loud. Emma smiled. The medical research has been fascinating, by the way. The Krill's intelligence scores have increased significantly since we implemented the new protocols. They are not just following commands anymore. They are problem-solving, showing initiative, even displaying what I would call compassion. Dembai are still weapons if we need them to be, Vex pointed out. Yes, but now they are weapons that choose to be weapons, not weapons that were tortured into compliance. There is a difference. Down in the training area, Butterscotch had located a dummy buried under foam debris and was carefully excavating around it, using his claws with surprising delicacy. When he successfully freed it, he looked immediately to Jake for approval. Good job, Butterscotch, Jake called out. Perfect technique. Butterscotch markings flashed brilliant cyan, and he did a small, proud wiggle. He's never going to stop doing that, is he? Vex asked. The wiggle? No, definitely not. That is just who Butterscotch is. Rix joined them, carrying a datapad bursting with reports. Commander, I have the requests from the other programs. 17 Coalition species have now reported similar bonding phenomena with their combat or working animals following interaction with human personnel. High Command wants us to develop training protocols for interspecies handler programs. Of course they do, Vex muttered. There is more, Rix continued, his whiskers twitching with barely contained excitement. The Automated Systems Division is reporting behavioral anomalies in their combat drones. Apparently, a human engineer named Torres showed sympathy to a damaged drone unit during repairs, and now the entire network is refusing to operate without her supervision. Emma choked on her coffee. The robots? The robots bonded with a human? According to preliminary reports, yes. They are calling it the Torres effect. Vex set down his coffee very carefully. Are you telling me that humans can accidentally befriend anything? It appears to be a consistent pattern, Rick said. Human capacity for empathy and social bonding seems to transcend biological barriers. They form attachments with species, machines, and apparently even fungi. There is a fascinating case from the agricultural station where... I do not want to know about the fungi, Vex interrupted. Jake finished the training session and made his way up to the observation deck, Butterscotch following faithfully at his side. The Krill had been granted special authorization to accompany Jake throughout the station, mostly because the alternative was listening to him whine constantly. Morning, everyone, Jake said cheerfully. How are the stats looking? Exceptional, Rix reported. Response times are down another 12%. Survivor recovery rates are at 98.4%. And the publicity department says your interview with Galactic News Network has been viewed 800 million times. The one where Butterscotch photobombed the entire second half? There, that would be the one. Jake scratched Butterscotch behind his head ridges, and the krill made a contented rumbling sound. See? I told you people love a good rescue story. The Coalition High Command has requested you consider writing a training manual, Emma said. Apparently every military branch wants to know how you did this. I just treated them with respect, Jake said simply. It is not complicated. For you, maybe, Vex said. For the rest of the galaxy, it apparently requires a complete philosophical restructuring of how we approach working relationships with other species. So you are saying I started a revolution by being nice to animals. That is exactly what I am saying, and I hate it. Jake grinned. Come on, Commander, admit it, you love these guys now. I tolerate them. As if on cue, one of the younger krill bounded up to Vex and dropped a training dummy at his feet, tail wagging hopefully. Vex stared down at the creature. I am not playing fetch with you. The krill made puppy dog eyes that should have been physically impossible for a reptilian apex predator. The eyes got bigger. Absolutely not. Emma pulled out her datapad and started recording. Vex picked up the dummy and threw it across the training floor. The young krill immediately chased after it with obvious delight, retrieved it, and brought it back. Not a word, Vex said to Emma. I'm sending this to Admiral Thorne. You are the worst. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the training facility bustle with activity. 7D Kryl worked through exercises, played during their break times, and generally seemed happier and healthier than they had ever been. Human handlers were being integrated into the program, learning Jake's methods. Rescue operations were being scheduled across 3 sectors. It was, objectively, the best possible outcome. You know what is funny, Jake said. Everyone always talks about humanity's capacity for violence, our adaptability in combat, our stubborn refusal to give up. And yeah, those things are true. But maybe our real superpower is just that we will befriend literally anything that shows even the slightest hint of personality. We cannot help ourselves. We see something alive and we immediately think, but what if we were friends, though? It is a weaponizable trait, Vex observed. Everything about humans is a weaponizable trait if you think about it wrong, Emma added. But in this case, I think the weapon is pointed in a good direction. Butterscotch, who had been listening to the conversation with the attentiveness of someone following along even if they did not understand all the words, made a questioning chirp. Yeah, buddy, Jake said, scratching his head ridges again. I think we are going to be okay. From across the facility, another krill called out, and Butterscotch perked up immediately. Jake gestured for him to go, and the warbeast bounded off to join his pack, his markings glowing with contentment. Vex watched him go, then turned to Jake. For the record, I still think you are completely insane. I will take that as a compliment, sir. It was not intended as one. I am taking it as one anyway. And somewhere in Coalition High Command, military analysts were adding another line to humanity's threat assessment file. Caution. Will befriend your weapon systems. Countermeasures. None identified. Recommendation. Just let it happen. Because in the end, the galaxy had learned an important lesson about humans. They did not conquer through force or domination. They conquered through stubborn, relentless, absolutely unreasonable kindness. And there was no defense against that.